Live. Oh, all right. Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to What's Your Everest, where we explore the mental health side of professional and competitive athletes and athletics with sports psychologist and mental game coach, Dr. Karla Steingraber. Hi, Karla. How are
Hi.
you?
Great. How are you?
Good, thanks. So I'm your host, Deanna Schaas, and today's guest, it's very exciting. It's Charles Grantham, and he is a change agent in the sports industry. He was the former executive director of the National Basketball Players Association, a board member for the USA Basketball's 1992 Dream Team, and an invitee to post-apartheid South Africa at the hands of Nelson Mandela. He has, Charles Grantham, he has negotiated $1 million win-win contracts between athletes and business organizations. And he now teaches the art of negotiation and dispute resolution to his students as the director of the Center for Sport Management at Seton Hall's University, the Stillman School of Business. So we're very excited to welcome Charles Grantham.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to join you.
You are welcome. And I'll tell you, we thought when we are going to talk about the intersection of mental health and professional sports, but little did we know that we're like breaking news today because you've been working for 20 some odd years on getting adequate representation and use of likeness and names for college athletes. And woohoo, yesterday passed, today it goes into effect. So can you tell us like what that means for students in the industry?
Well, the Alston case, which was decided by the Supreme Court, was pretty narrow in its decision, in that the question was how much, not compensation, but what kind of benefits could they actually receive without violating the antitrust law. And essentially what happened here is that the Supreme Court ruled that the amateurism system that has been employed by the NCAA all this time actually violates the antitrust law. And so that the entire system, as they said, was unlawful.
Wow. And basically when you're talking about the amateurism is that, well, they're college students, so they're not professional. And yet people are making billions of dollars off their likeness. And I mean, that's a big industry.
Well, this has been going on for many, many, many years. And the idea that they've been able to escape the kind of litigation results has been surprising. But it's pretty clear that not only the Supreme Court, but the various states who decided that it was unfair and unreasonable that the student athlete not share in some form or fashion, decided to create state laws which would allow them to be compensated for the use of their likeness. Now that's something that you and I enjoy and have since we were born. But this is somehow only
interesting
2021 when we decide that the student athlete should have the same right.
In fact, actually, Governor Pritzker here in Illinois, where I'm based, just signed that into law, I think, on Tuesday. So this is only good. This is only good and well-deserved. But a couple weeks ago, Karla, you interviewed Prim Saripapat, who's a reporter. She's an anchor for ESPN. And you were talking about parents and how parents are ruining youth sports. And so now I wonder how this new ruling will kind of trickle down now that college athletes can earn money. Like, how does that trickle down to kids that are just up and coming through sports?
Right. I wanted to ask about your thoughts with these type A parents that might be pushing children harder because they're expecting some kind of a payday. And the percentages, of course, the statistics show that not everybody makes it. Oh, it looks like we're having tech issues.
So I imagine Charles will be right back. So actually, Karla, what do you think about that? Because you've always said the game has to be fun. It feels like when the stakes get higher, that it stops being as much fun.
Oh, certainly. Because you'll have all this pressure put on that either the individual puts on themselves or the parents do, and sometimes even the coaches. And it does take the fun out of it. And you can imagine that if something isn't fun, it's really a lot harder to enjoy losses. Only the wins become enjoyable. And even then it becomes really fleeting. So the reward is really delayed, if at all.
Mm-hmm. And that's so funny. So I guess I won't ask you about the rookie program, but I will ask you about the rookie program. So when Charles, I'm sure Charles will be back shortly. When Charles was at the National Basketball Players Association, he set up a whole rookie program where it was not just, the players playing, but with new players coming in on how they could get oriented almost to it. What do you see as some of the lifestyle things that play into someone becoming a professional athlete? Because you do mental game coaching with professional athletes.
Right. Yeah. Some of the things I've seen with collegiate athletes that are then going professional or new professional athletes, there's just so much that a young person anyway doesn't really know. Unless they've had mentors or parents that have been guiding them on how to prepare for the future, we don't know what we don't know. And Charles set up a program that had to do with orienting them and their families to the pressures of professional life and what they can expect, how to deal with all these pressures, because all eyes are on you. There's all kinds of criticism in the news. And how do you deal with people talking badly about you and you see it publicized everywhere? And other things that he did was setting up programs for already planning for retirement and second career. What will they do after this part of their career journey ends? So these are all really important things for mentors to guide you through. Otherwise, you just have no idea how to get to where everybody else has gotten to.
Wow. So Charles, I believe Charles is back with us, not on camera, but Charles, are you here? Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
We absolutely can hear you.
Oh, good. I don't know what that happened. I mean, again, this is part of the program when you deal with some of these technical issues, but please repeat that question. I didn't get all of it.
So we were talking about, actually, we covered a couple things while you were gone. The first one, well, Karla, go ahead and ask, because Charles had left right when you wanted to ask him what we were talking about, which is, what does this do to like little league and sports as you come up now that youth can make money? That's a lot of money now that people can make, I would imagine, in college. And parents sometimes think that great, we're saved. How does the game stay? I know, or how does it stay fun for kids? Karla, I think you had questions for Charles about that.
Yeah, for sure. Because of course there are going to be some parents that are then pushing their children in a different kind of way or with a different intensity because they are hoping for or expecting a possible payday. What are your thoughts about those mental health pressures, Charles?
Well, these things begin very early, and there's no question that whether it's Little League or the All-Star game, All-Star teams, the traveling teams, as you move up that ladder, we often put so much pressure on our young people to mature at the same time their game is developing. So often what happens is their game develops very quickly, but their maturity sort of doesn't keep up with it. So often what I've often said is starting in high school, one of the things I tried to implement years ago with the NBA players and all professionals, to have an employee assistance program so that they can actually make a call and talk to them or someone special about their particular stress levels. And, we sort of did that when cocaine entered the business of sport back in the 80s. And it was a big problem for celebrities, but more importantly, our athletes kind of went toward this idea of being free using cocaine without suffering the consequences of smelling like alcohol, et cetera, et cetera. But many of them looked at that as an escape. And I had to get the owners to understand that this was addiction. We had to start to think about this as a disease. and therefore open up opportunities for them to discuss this and talk to people about it, as opposed to just kicking them out of the league as soon as they tested positive, for example. I see the same thing with regard to all of these mental health issues. They are real issues. And depending on the individual student athlete, we have a variety of stress level tests that they either have to pass or fail. And it's unfortunate that both employers, particularly employers, are willing to pay millions of dollars for a contract, but don't recognize the need for individual counseling. That should start back in high school. It should certainly follow through in college. So when we're talking about health benefits on the college level, even for the student athletes, part of that should be counseling services for people like Karla.
Well, and Brianna says, do you find the mental pressures are harder to deal with than the physical pressures? And she was also thinking, especially we're talking about as athletes are coming up, but she's wondering as well as their career prospects start to wane.
I think, again, it speaks to every individual difference and challenge. Some young people get hurt early and have great potential, but can't realize the potential because of the various injuries. And what type of pressure does that injury bring upon this student athlete? A part of that competition, again, stresses that if you're hurt, then it's sort of the next person up, as they often call it, the next man up or the next woman up. Well, guess what? You have a large number of either student athletes or professional athletes are dying for the opportunity to play. So an injury may cause that you don't get your next contract, or you don't get the starting role, or you become a substitute, or in some of the issues on the college level or the pro level, that you are eliminated from the team. I mean, all of these things, I think, are pressure points.
Charles, don't you think, I mean, you've been called a pioneer in the sports industry, and just even talking to you for this short time, looking at how far back you were talking about compensation for college athletes, this whole idea of EAP for professional athletes all seems really innovative. What I wonder is, though, especially when you know that you can be replaced so quickly, are people comfortable talking about mental health, or do players feel like they have to hide that if they're feeling mental health issues?
Again, when we talk about the skill development and the mental development are typically not on the same pathway, so that one may supersede the other. What we require of these young people is to mature in that fishbowl, because you're playing and participating and competing in a fishbowl. And you're asking them also to act like 35-year-olds while they're growing up and maturing in this fishbowl. So some of them are extremely anxious about the idea of meeting the press. We saw in the Olympics, the Olympic tennis player, were anxious about having those settings without some form of preparation. And if that is the elite athlete making those kind of comments, then what do you think is happening to those at the college level or the younger pro level who are trying to make it in this industry? It's a very, very, very competitive industry. And some of the employers may see that idea of counseling as not being mentally tough enough.
Well, so what's interesting, though, what Karla does, and Karla, I'll let you speak to this, but as a sports psychologist, it's looking at mental health not as a deficit, but how do you get that mindset of getting deeper into the game? So, Karla, how do you do that? And are there biases or do you feel that people resent it if it's lumped in with mental health?
Well, I guess there are some people where, they at the elite level, they've perfected their game. Not that they aren't continuing to learn and improve, but they've perfected their game pretty much. And they've certainly perfected things in the weight room. They've perfected their interactions with the coaches, mostly. They've perfected their nutrition. Nice to see you.
Hi, Charles. Yay.
But the last frontier really is, do you have the mental edge on somebody else? Because like you said, Charles, there's that fishbowl effect. You're at the line, and are you going to make the shot, or are you going to miss? And you've got, I don't know, 50,000 or 3 million or however many people watching you, and it's going to be written about, and it's going to be recorded and talked about and publicized. And it's a lot of pressure. And a lot of kids, they were the best in their junior high. They were the best on their high school team. They might have even been the best on the team they got recruited to in college. And then all of a sudden, you're a small fish in a big pond because everybody's at the ultra elite level. And now what? How do you feel for the first time in your life being average, even though you're in this highly elite group? You're average compared to the elites, and that can feel really bad. So those who are able to see that they might be able to manage their anxiety better when they're at the line or walking into the game or standing on the blocks about to dive in, they're going to be able to benefit the most and see it as part of the whole game process or game preparation process.
As part of that, Brianna asked a question because it is often parents, and using the term kids loosely because, they're always your babies. But what's the right balance between pushing your kids who play sports, but not too hard? And maybe not even as parents, Charles, what's the balance? How hard do you push players to perform?
Well, in fairness, you almost have to allow the young person to develop that balance. I can recall being a youngster, you really want to play a certain sport. I think the challenge is that once you define or decide with this young person that sports is really what they want, it's what they want. And to whatever reason they may need to advance their maturity or whatever, but that competition is something that feeds on them. Once they make that decision, then I think as parents, we're going to support that and provide any help and assistance that we possibly can. And so I think it starts as early as a young person gets involved in sports. I mean, do we have to call Karla? Perhaps not, but we can talk to Karla about the kinds of things we should be doing that early in their life to encourage them to kind of talk about these things later on. I don't know if any of you watched the Philadelphia 76er in the playoffs in the NBA. If you're not familiar with that, I totally understand. But one of the players, Ben Simmons, is a player of note, a fantastic player, and had trouble shooting at the foul line. And finally, he did say, I think it's a mental thing, that he was shooting like 2 for 15 or whatever the number was. Well, given what happened during that time, if you read the papers regarding that those playoff losses, the discussion now centers around trading him. Mm-hmm. Where we're in fact, Karla and Deanna, is that if I'm the team, I'm looking for a way now to support him. I'm looking for a way to figure out, because guess what, guys? At the end of the day, when he is able to overcome this anxiety, we're going to be better off as a team. We're going to sell more tickets. Yeah. We're going to generate more revenue. So what I would like to see at all of these levels is that the colleges and universities, the professional team owners, see this as a way of improving your business. You're doing better business by offering these opportunities to share with someone professional about your anxiety and how do we overcome that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that feels like something. And let's go ahead. Sorry, Karla.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's such a common experience, anxiety over performance of some sort or being under pressure. I mean, just think about when we were all in grade school and we had to do our first presentations in front of the classroom. Most of us are not natural performers who were born into that. We kind of have to get our feet wet and get used to it. And some of us take a little bit longer because we're a little bit more shy or introverted. So it does take some coaching and attention to normalizing the experience of anxiety. We all get it at some point.
A big part a big part of my class in negotiations is about students having the ability to stand up and articulate their interests and their reasons to negotiate on a certain subject. And we start with understanding and knowing your subject matter. Because if you do, you're going to be less anxious when you have to discuss it. But
Absolutely.
I actually have them stand up and go through a 3 or 4 or 5 minute presentation as to what are the things that you are adamantly opposed to in this negotiation, or what is it that you want versus what is it that you need. And once you figure out and decide that I can really articulate my needs, okay, we're halfway along the battle here. So it's so important that we all receive this outside encouragement, at the same time being able to overcome the anxiety, or overcoming the odds, if you want to call it that.
You know, the rookie program that you started, so you were executive director of the National Basketball Players Association. That seemed very forward thinking, because it even looked at retirement. It looked at, I think you even did a mentoring, sort of a matching and onboarding program, which is something I hadn't heard of before. Is that something that's new, or is that been continued? Do individual teams do that now?
Continued it, because again, it's funny, when we negotiated this and I raised the question of an orientation, management on the other side was going, well, why does he want that? Well, my God, you're talking about 20, 21-year-old people making an adjustment. And the biggest issue with our young athletes, at least those who are rising to the pro level or to the college level, is that we're going to make these transitions in their life. They're transitioning from junior high school to high school, from high school to college, from college to professional. And at the same time, you're in this fishbowl. We, meaning adults, are also pressuring you about, what are you going to do next? Because you're only going to probably be a professional athlete for 4 or 5 years. There's something else you're going to do for a greater majority of your life. And have you thought about those things? And again, we're putting that group pressure to talk about a transition and anticipate a transition that they haven't thought about
Right,
yet.
when they're just getting started.
So
started.
the rookie orientation really was about that. And about using resources and your assets. And by the way, if that's something that concerns you, let me suggest to all of you, as I would say to them, you have to be introduced to Uncle Sam, because Uncle Sam is going to take 50% of your cash. Okay. And you'd be surprised how many didn't understand who Uncle Sam was. Okay. So you ought to understand that. A lot of people are going to want to meet you. So one of the things that I recommend you do is get their business card and go home and think about that. Is this a career, or is this something that I may have an interest in when I decide to stop playing? Is this something I should cultivate? All of those things become anxious or anxiety moments for some of our young people. So,
You know, Charles, I wonder for you.
Oh, I was just briefly going to say, I just really appreciate that you have thought those things through and brought them forward and even created systems for it. Because, you know, I know when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I didn't know what my future career would be. Certainly some kids know from young on what they want to do, but often it doesn't work out exactly like that. And you really do need some kind of a mentor or parent who reminds you these are also things you still need to think about and consider. And too many of us, we get too far down the road and nobody told us to open up a Roth IRA, and we haven't even heard about it, and things like that. Somebody's gotta tell us what to think about and consider. And some of the best colleges and universities, they have orientation programs. They have counselors there. They've got career counseling centers as well, because not everybody has parents that are going to be telling them this along the way.
One of the big things about rookies in these professional sports is to understand the following. And I make this very clear to them in the beginning. for those who own professional franchises and own teams, or if you are in the upper managerial levels of the NCAA or athletic director or coach, they are in the business of maximizing revenue. Maximizing revenue. And then we talk a little about what that means. Maximizing revenue. They're also in the business of minimizing cost. Mm-hmm. Okay, now what side do you fit? Where do you fit? You're in the area of minimizing costs. So that means that your goal has to be about maximizing income. How do I maximize my income? It may not be with this team. It may be somewhere else. Yeah. I've always got to recognize that they're in the business of contradicting what I'm in the business for.
Yeah.
I'm in it to raise revenue. They're in it to minimize my costs. And you have to understand that from the beginning because young people, the average lifespan's about 3 years. So if you're 21, by 25, you're going to be looking for something else to do. Somebody has to talk about that reality early on. And if not, I think they also get lost.
You know, it's amazing just given the level of contracts that you negotiate. I'm thinking, you know, with the Dream Team, with Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, and you've represented Charles Barkley. So you're representing athletes at this extreme, at a really, really high level. And what I'm fascinated in listening to you talk is how you bring such a humanity to it. Because as someone outside of the sports industry, you think it's all dog eat dog and that nobody really, you know, that nobody's caring. How are you able to maintain that humanity through all that you do? And really, it sounds like you just have such a deep caring for the athletes themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a challenge, but I take on that as my role. When I met with the Dream Team, look, the Dream Team was the first time that professionals were going to play in the Olympics. Mm-hmm. Okay. And up to this point, the NCAA, as well as the Olympics, practiced what you call amateurism, which meant that no one could be paid.
Mm-hmm. That was a big deal.
They came to ask us to participate. I said, I am speaking on the interest of the athletes, because I know that if you ask them to play for free, they would feel obligated to play for their country. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to tell you that that is not going to work. That I want, if there are 3 parties here, and you're in the business of maximizing revenue, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So for the first time in Olympic history, you're going to have to compensate our 12 guys. Okay. Now, they may not tell you that. I'm telling you that. So I have to be you have to carry that burden, because I know the public pressure would be immense on them. Well, you are earning X number of dollars as a basketball player. Why would you not play for free? Because this is still a business venture. The Olympics is still a business venture. And we're partners in this venture. So we're demanding that, or I'm demanding that in order for them to participate, that they will get 1/3 of all revenue generated by this team to be divided equally among them. And that ultimately was the deal that we negotiated and settled on. But since then, I'm not certain that they still continue to compete in that fashion.
I'm sure the revenue that year was like triple fold.
Yeah,
we are getting close to the end of our time. So I do want to invite people who are watching live, if you have any questions or comments, to please share those. I know Brianna says she's heard people say, we were talking about anxiety, the feelings that come with anxiety, from fear to excitement. The feelings are the feelings. Do you find that there's a way to reframe it? Actually, that may even be a question for Karla. You must work with people to try to reframe it.
Oh, certainly. Really, the difference between anxiety and excitement is really just how you frame the situation. And there's a lot of excitement in any kind of game because you might win or lose. Otherwise, if you always knew you're going to lose, or if you always knew you're going to win, you're not going to be very excited about this game. So, yeah, it definitely is a framing.
Mhm.
But Charles, I have a question for you. You've had so much passion for athletes and NBA, and for at the professional level, at the collegiate level. You've had so much compassion too, all this forward thinking in terms of what they're going to need, what kind of mentorship and things that need to be put in place to protect them and their lives in the future, their revenue, et cetera. I wonder, what is your Everest? What's next for you? What do you think about? Because I suspect that you would be very attractive as a franchise owner.
Oh boy, that's quite a question. Right now, I'm giving back, meaning that I'm a professor, and I do get a lot out of expressing and transferring this knowledge to young people who are interested in sport career. I often remind them it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But I started out when I got out of college, I wanted to be a baseball player, but ended up coaching, but teaching special education. I taught special ed for 3 years and recognized that I couldn't afford to raise a family with that money. I had to get back to business school. But I learned so much in those 3 years dealing with young people who had disabilities that when I did get to the next level, it just gave me another sense of being able to communicate and transfer knowledge in a way that they would comprehend and understand. Going forward, I wouldn't mind being involved in a franchise. That would be a nice goal. But to be honest with you, again, I go back to, I am excited by the fact that the door or the window or the screen has been removed from the NCAA, and that they have been exploitive and abusive for all these years. And the people starting to recognize that the student athlete, this phrase student athlete, was specifically designed to avoid liability because they didn't want them to be perceived as employees. So when you go back and think about 1903, 1905, 1910, and that we consciously sat down and said, we want to avoid injuries and liability on behalf of the university. So we're going to title these young people student athletes. And they've gotten away with it all this time. And I am just thrilled to see that Congress has decided that, okay, we played this game long enough. It's a sham. You've pulled it on us for a long time, but we figured it out. And now we're going to compel you to change your behavior.
Yeah, it's historic.
Well, thank you so much. And we're so excited to have the conversation with you on literally the day that this historic thing has been put into play. So thank you so much for that. Any final insights from either of you, just, as professional athletes or professional sports continues to evolve, just any changes that you're seeing or things you hope will be on the horizon for caring for the whole being, mental and physical health of athletes?
Well, one thing I would say, and that is the social justice engagement of the athletes on the professional level is beginning to impact the professional ownership. Meaning that the ownership was not the first ones to get out there and support these causes, but the athletes were and are. And speaking of mental health, again, the expectation that as a young Black athlete, you're going to stand for Black Lives Matter. For those who may not understand the pressure that may bring to some young people as well. So the fact that the ownership of professional basketball teams and football and teams have opened their arenas for voting, have contributed to the cause pushed. But now I'm also suggesting that in order for those owners to really be in sync with the entire movement, the one thing that they must do is change their constitution, because it's the Constitution that they each abide by because they're owners and they get together and this is how our organization will be run, that they have to make that commitment to the players in order for this thing to really effectuate change. It's like Nelson Mandela saying that sports can change. I truly believed him. And I think that can happen, but the parties have to collaborate. They haven't quite gotten there yet.
That sounded like another affirmation of your becoming a franchise owner. Now that, now that you got the NCAA, that sounds like we're looking for you to be on the forefront of that, Charles. So
yeah, I would just wish that there would be more people like you out there, because all these things that you're bringing up, this is the kind of thinking that any kind of leadership, whether we're talking about political or in the business world, really this kind of thinking needs to trickle down. This is the only way that we bring young people up. And we have so many things working against us right now with social media and the distractions that are happening. And so people are getting a very mediocre to bad education on a general social level, and they're not getting enough of this kind of mentorship to think forward. And we really have to teach our young people how to be involved and committed and speak up for themselves and all those important things.
I would leave you with one thought, that with this NCAA breaking news today, the question still remains: is the education of the student athlete a priority or a distraction?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It is, and I'm sure one that now will probably be in the forefront with the debate as the conversation continues. Well, thank you so much, Charles Grantham, for being on What's Your Everest. We're so excited to be able to connect with you today, and to get such. Again, as Karla said, can you be cloned and duplicated so that there's this heart going throughout the world of professional sports?
I'm so thankful for you having me, because I really love the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you again
so much.
For reaching out.
Yeah.
Yes, and thanks for all your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.